I'd like to call to order the workshop of January 19th, 2021. And first on the agenda is form-based code expansion with Eric Cousins. And I gotta say, we did a lot of work on the audio portion of this, and it sounds better already. So thank you, Brian. There we go.
Yeah, echo. Yeah,
A little bit.
it's echoey.
I was a little too close.
All set? Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I know you guys have spent a lot of time on the form-based code updates over the last few months. Part of that has been because when you're talking about larger areas in the downtown, we send out public notices to all the property owners that are in the affected area, plus a buffer of 500 feet around that. So when you're talking about a downtown area for a rezoning, you're talking about a lot of notices, and we were nervous about sending 600 to 800 notices out for a single public meeting at the planning board level. So we've broken this up into three parts. And as you have, as we have a public hearing at the planning board level, a workshop here, 2 readings here, it adds up to a lot of meetings. So I know you're pretty familiar with the T42 district, which has been the majority of the district used for the downtown neighborhood that you've already adopted, the downtown enterprise neighborhood here between Main Street, Minot Avenue, High Street, Academy, Elm, that neighborhood, in the same zone that we're using for the New Auburn area. The planning board had spent a significant amount of time looking at how the standards for the T42 district match up to the existing character in the New Auburn neighborhood as well as the earlier neighborhoods. And really the conclusion was that with the reduced front setbacks, it really better matches the existing neighborhood character in those neighborhoods than the current zoning does. New Auburn always seems to participate at a higher level than the other neighborhoods. We had close to 50 calls at a staff level from the New Auburn public notices, and about a half a dozen members of the public that attended the meeting. So really not a lot of people that attended the meeting, but a lot of questions, a lot of comments leading up to it. There were still a couple of people, 3 I think actually at the planning board meeting, that had concerns about it, but the vast majority of the people that we spoke to over the month leading up to that, once they understood the changes, that it allowed for more flexibility in front porches, buildings closer to the street, from 5 to 15 feet away from the street instead of the current requirement of 25 feet. You can look at the mapping in New Auburn and really see that that matches most of the area that was currently multifamily urban zone, and the planning board ended up voting unanimously to recommend the change for the New Auburn area as well. It is limited to the area that's currently multifamily urban. There is room, I think, for some expansion in the future if the council and planning board wanted to, but for the time being, it's limited to what's now the multifamily urban zoning district. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council? No, good process from what I gather, and I got some good feedback too. Once the misconceptions were cleared up, everybody felt fine.
I just had a few questions. What is the, is that an arbitrary line? You said there was room to add more growth into New Auburn as we go further up South Main Street. Is that just a starting point, and then we would move forward at some point as the neighborhoods grow?
Certainly could. The multifamily urban zone is the area of New Auburn that most closely matches the character of the new form-based code district. There's certainly some room for adjusting those boundaries, or if you wanted to see that more urban character extend further out within the community, then it could be expanded in the future.
Excellent, thank you.
I know that the planning board a few years ago originally talked about expanding it, but we had decided at that time that it made sense to do a more incremental approach than to try to cover too large an area and maybe pick up areas where there would be more controversy than the multifamily urban zone.
Councilor McLeod and Councilor Boss. Do you think that there's room in our upcoming planning or comp plan review process this week to discuss this amongst the group and to see if there's any recommendations or any thoughts on how this might deconflict or be deconflicted with anything that the planning or comp plan review has going forward? Not to make a decision, yea or nay, but at least to give opinion. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I know one of the comp plan committee groups that's looking to reduce the overall number of zoning districts is talking about taking the 6 or 7 residential zones that we have and narrowing them down to more of a zone that's urban, a zone that's suburban, and a zone that's rural. So if that happens, I think that would leave room for that discussion as part of that recommendation.
Very good, thank you. Is there any other, Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know, Mr. Cousins, you've put an awful lot of work and detail into the report. And on the surface, it looks like it would be a good report, a good plan for development into New Auburn. But in my heart, with this COVID and our lack of a chance of having meetings to really have people into a room with the maps and to fully explain it to them, I am very cautious about supporting this as is till we get, because I'm still hearing little comments from neighbors. One, they don't have internet access or know enough how to do the Zoom to be able to participate, to listen to either our council meetings or even the planning boards. So they're not sure if this is a good thing. And I don't want to muddy the water if it is a good thing and we can have the meetings to explain to people and get them on board, because I'd hate to implement something and have people feel left out of the process and feel like they're being steamrolled or strong-armed into something. Council Walker, what have you heard about this? Have you heard much of anything?
I've only had a couple people that have asked questions about it, and Eric has reached out to them people and talked with them. And I think talking with you, everything was pretty settled in their mind after you got done speaking with them.
With the exception of a few. There are some people that are still concerned, but relatively few compared to the overall calls that we had.
Yeah, it's just a small minority of people that, and I think it's because they're not sure of what they're hearing. They think it might be more than what they're actually hearing from us, so.
And this is the workshop. We'll still have 2 readings. One of them will be a public hearing, certainly a chance to voice their opinions. And if somebody is talking to you that doesn't feel that they can participate online, let us know. We can bring a map to them, sit on their front porch with them, go over how it affects their property, and they'll either decide that it's okay, or they may still have concerns, but we'll at least make sure they understand it.
Council Walker, are you still having your United New Auburn meetings? And if so, could we have a presentation? I know it would be limited seating, but is there any chance we could have some staff come with maps and to explain to those that would come in?
Until things get better with the COVID, I've postponed December, January, February are postponed until hopefully things will start to get better.
Councilor McLeod?
I just had one other question. Does the new expanded zoning, is that detrimental to any of the plots that you were looking at in that new zone? That would cause, if that were to be destroyed, they would not be able to replicate a similar house to what they have now?
So the planning board talked a lot about that, not creating more nonconformities. Anytime you have zoning, there's going to be some properties that don't meet every standard. This new zone provides a lot more properties that conform to the standard than the current zoning does, especially with respect to that front setback of 25 feet. We can pull up some mapping too as part of the discussion if you want, either at the first reading. We have a few minutes tonight as well. But we could plan on doing that at the first reading if you want to actually look at some of the lot measurements and the general. You could pick some properties that you think represent the general character of the neighborhood, and we can measure those and compare them to the current zoning versus the new zoning.
Mr. Cousins, thank you very much. We appreciate your work on this. and staff's work and planning board's work. I know this was tabled once before on planning board to give people more time to comment, so. And you all bring up a very good point too when you're talking about citizen involvement, especially some of our residents who can't log in via internet, television, what have you. We do have to continue to think about reaching out in non-traditional or new ways, using new media and old media to make sure they're fully engaged. We're going to have a lot more ordinances to review and vote on in the upcoming couple months, so more important now than ever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, city ordinance review. We're going to have the city manager, Phil Crowell, presenting. Brian, can I present with you, or just you, Phil?
We'll chime in both.
Okay, very good.
So thank you, Mayor, Council. As you know, picking up from after our charter review, the ordinance also states that it will include an ordinance review in its entirety after at least once every 15 years. So this is a review that we're doing. We've had staff working on this. Some of this has come from conversations that we may have had here in the council meeting and flagging those, preparing those and getting them ready for a future meeting, or it's ones that as staff we've taken a look at and say, how does that align with current practice? Or what is the best practice for that municipalities are moving towards? And that will certainly come into play when we talk about taxi cab licensing and what's happening across the country and at municipalities. So to start with, under Chapter 1, we didn't see any recommended changes. I do hope that you take some time to take a look at that. Let us know if there's anything that you see that we need to identify. But as staff, we didn't see any recommended changes in Chapter 1. Chapter 2, under administration, there were two, well, there was more than that. There's, starting off with anyway, time and place of regular meetings. We have talked about, this is our second or maybe even more than that, where we've changed the meeting that would normally be on the following Monday. To have the meeting, what we're proposing is to be that next Tuesday, and is when we would have the council meeting. That way we're not having back-to-back weeks for a council meeting. What we've done in the past, when we've looked at that, is one of those meetings is really light, because staff really needs at least 2 weeks to gear up for any materials for that meeting, and to have them back-to-back, one of them usually has very little on the agenda. So staff would be recommending that. And I guess what we can do is, as I go through these, if there's anything that you have for questions or concerns, or if as a group you're saying, no, we want to keep it the way it is, then this is the time for that feedback, and please feel free to jump in on that. I'll keep moving to section 2-59, which is rules of procedures.
Hold on, Mr. Manager, if I could. Everybody, this has been general practice on our meetings going to the alternate Tuesday. Is everybody kind of conceptually good with that concept? Be good to get an easy, quick win out of the way?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah? Okay, thank you. I just want to get you some more guidance.
The next one is regarding open session. And again, sometimes this is about just our practice when we have open sessions. There was, this did get changed a few years ago in 2015 regarding adding a second open session. Part of that original need was that some of our open sessions had gone on for greater than an hour. And at times we'd have someone here either waiting for a license or waiting to present, and they'd be waiting for that hour for their new business to come up on the agenda. And so as we've been looking at open sessions, trying to make sure that we're following at least some consistent practice, that second open session was included in 2015. And really the intent at that time was that it would be if there was that continuation of the first open session. That isn't the practice that we're using. The practice that we're using is somebody comes up and speaks during the first open session, they come up and they can speak further in the second open session. Part of why we have the open session first is so that people are not speaking to items that are on the agenda. We have that open session first. The mayor gives the direction, These are for items that are not on the agenda. You'll need to speak at that during those times. That second open session does open that opportunity that you may have already had a discussion regarding a new business. You may have even already voted on that new business. And now the public is now speaking to that item again, even though you've already moved. Maybe they're not in agreement with it, whatever it might be. It just is another open session availability. So part of that would be to eliminate that. There's no practice out there that has these two open sessions for any municipality. We are the only community that does that. Some communities have really limited open sessions and provided only opportunities to speak for items on the agenda. I think there was a good conversation regarding this back in 2015, which was not to do that, but still have that open availability. What the mayor can do, and what we could put in the language, is that if the open session does go beyond, 30 minutes, the mayor could say, we're going to close this open session and we'll continue the open session after the business that we have scheduled on the agenda, without necessarily always putting a second open agenda, which then allows somebody to come in. I want to make sure you are aware, too, there were some discussions back in 2015, as I went back and took a look at this, that some people did state that they may have been at a meeting watching it from home, and by having that second open session allowed them to come in to then speak to something. And so that did come up as part of discussions. But most of the time it was regarding an item that was on the agenda, and they really should have spoken during that time and not later on. So this is just, staff is fine either way, but this is just, again, aligning good practice. Councilor Lasagna.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I want to have some discussion about this because I think it's really important. This is where we get people from this community to come in and be able to respond to things. I think the idea about the open sessions, that people can hear the entire agenda and then respond to them, is probably something that we should seriously consider in retaining that. So I'll put that out there. And then the second one is, I mentioned in here, and my computer's not working, so I can't see exactly the wording, but the whole thing about allotted time, being able to have a set allotted time, I think, has been really helpful. And to my reading, it says that we will take off that allotted time. Is that true? Meaning when somebody comes up, the mayor or somebody puts a clock on them and they have a certain amount of time to speak. And I have seen that be extremely helpful sometimes. So I don't know whether it's saying that we're going to get rid of that allotted time or that it's still going to be there, or if that's just practice rather than something that should be in the ordinance.
So the allotted time is in policy, not in ordinance.
Yeah.
Currently. And so that can be changed or however, but currently it's in just the council policy practice
It's
for
not
conducting
codified.
meetings, but not in ordinance, yeah.
And I agree with you. In my opinion, as mayor, as someone else presided over the open sessions, the time limit is extremely helpful. It keeps moving around. I do like the idea of limiting time, to 1 hour and then 45 minutes on the second. We've talked about some of those scenarios as well, just to keep the meetings flowing as a good practice and for people that might be here, or executive sessions post-fact. So, but you don't want to stifle anything.
I also agree with Councilor Lasagna. We need to, I believe, keep them both there just in case there's that opportunity, and if it's needed. Sometimes I also would like to think about the time limit that we have on that first session. I think in some cases, some people are using the second one because we're at a 3-minute. We never use the 45 minutes we're allotted, and probably never is not the right word, but very, very few times we ever go past 30 minutes. So putting people at the 5-minute may take away some of them wanting to stay for the second one. And I think 3 minutes with people that haven't got all their thoughts together is just not enough time, because they'll stumble over what they want to say and to get going. So I'd like to think about it and have people think about it here, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. It means a lot to some people.
So if that's dealt with in policy versus ordinance,
Yep.
I mean, and again, I think that there's policies a little bit, and it's up to the discretion of the mayor a lot of times too. And you'll know recently people have been speaking. I'm keeping time on my phone, and they'll go over 3 minutes, and it's okay. you know, and you try to remind them to keep them on task. But there is a little bit of kind of wiggle room. But I agree with you. I don't think there's been more, in the last 3 years, more than once where we've had more than an hour of public comment in 3 years, probably. Councilor Gray, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got to figure out what type of procedures we're going to use for our open sessions. I mean, some of them in the way past have been confrontagious. When somebody would go over their 5 minutes and they might have needed 6 minutes because it took them a minute to get their papers and their thoughts together, and there was disagreement between them and the mayor. I don't want to see that happen again. I was here about the time that this was put in here, and I understand that the first time was to limit the time for people, and it wasn't just for people that came in for their licenses and stuff. It was also to help the employees that had already put in a hard day. They worked all their hours, and then they have to sit here in the audience and put in 2 and 3 and 4 hours more when they could get their piece said and done and then go home and be with their families. I do not like changing our ordinance or rules from what we've got now established. I don't want to put this in writing. I do appreciate this being able to have the second session, and like the good city manager says, sometimes there are people at home that are working late. They come in and they couldn't make it into our meeting to sit in here to talk their concerns out at the first session. And they said, oh, I missed the first one, there's no need to go in. But then they hear something and it sparks them. Oh, I gotta go in, I want to give my input. I need to get some more questions answered. And that's why I support the open session for those that need to come in and speak, or if they need to speak more than 5 minutes, like the good Mr. Pelletier, when he comes in, he's got important topics that he's got to discuss, and he sometimes needs that 1 minute more, because sometimes his presentation is thought out, and he too has to concentrate on what words he's trying to say to make the point. Some of us each have a different style of how we speak. I know I'm not the best, most eloquent speaker, and I may need the 5 minutes, 1 minute to get myself together. And I promise I won't go no further.
Okay. So is there, I mean, right now, I'm just doing a quick kind of consensus count in my head. It seems that so far, the majority of counselors have spoken, or all, want to keep the second open session there, maybe revise some policy, not ordinance, with regards to time frame, maybe even the time frame of the second session versus the first, and the amount of time people are allowed to speak, correct? Councilor Boss?
Yeah, I would just add that I agree with keeping both sessions. I think these are long meetings, so regardless, somebody's waiting. So I'd rather keep the both sessions so that people have the opportunity to speak if they'd like to.
But it just at least bookend them with some distinct time so at least we can set expectations for people that are trying to do other business here. Fair enough. Okay, any other comment on that? I think we got some consensus for you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
So the next item was regarding secondhand dealers. This is language that came through the police department, who deals with most of our secondhand dealer licenses like pawn shops. The state had done a great deal of statute changes a few years ago, which then changed a lot of our policy relating to secondhand dealers. You'll see that most of the language is in alignment with what our current practice is. It just wasn't updated within our city ordinance. A lot of this has to do with reporting requirements. There's certain formatting that the ordinance allows for us to receive what used to be, the practice used to be is that we would go around and we would pick up pawn slips. The pawn slips would then be taken into the city. A staff person would sit there and enter all those pawn slips into our database. Now we take that in electronic format, we bring it in, we're able to access that. Some of it has to do with requiring pawnbrokers or others, junk collectors or secondhand dealers, to keep certain documentation available for inspection. Not necessarily that we're going to grab it, but just available for us to review if need be, and also limits when they can sell something to ensure that a good amount of time has come in for that property to at least been processed through our system to determine whether or not that's stolen goods. No questions?
Councilor Gary?
Just a very slight one. This has nothing to do with if I have a yard sale at Barker and different tenants are trying to sell some of their stuff, right?
nothing
This
to do
don't
with that.
fall into that, because I had a couple tenants kind of wonder what this was all about.
Unless they have a second-hand dealer license and they're operating under that, this would have nothing to do with that.
No, these are just regular citizens.
Yeah, has nothing to do with even somebody putting something on Craigslist or Facebook, whatever that Facebook app is, but has nothing to do with that.
Thank you.
All right, the next one, this is new language. It currently does not exist. It has to do with day treatment centers and live-in treatment centers, and regarding some language to address the demand for this type of business. Chief Moen is on our Zoom call, and he can speak to this more, so I'm going to have him just give you a quick overview on this. I've reviewed it. I did ask him to give some updated language, which he will make available for you. It's just defining some of this. There was no section in here with definitions, so what defines a live-in center, those kind of things. So, Chief, you want to make any comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Manager. Like the manager said, the reason for this ordinance is we're starting to see a proliferation in treatment centers, both residential and day treatment centers here in the city. And with DHS, they are currently not licensing residential programs that have only 1 or 2 residents per house. Because what we're seeing now is we're seeing where these companies will come in, they will purchase a house in a residential area, they will put 1 or 2 clients in that house with not even caregivers, but chaperones to kind of oversee them on a day-to-day basis. And DHS isn't licensing those as of yet. Being told by DHS they're going to start licensing them sometime later on this year, but we're not sure when. Currently, we have, as near as we can tell, we've got 51 establishments in Auburn that will be affected by this. 37 of them are residential facilities, i.e. mostly single-family homes. And there are 14 facilities here in the city that are multiple clients, more than 3 per building. So by doing this gives us a chance to actually have some tracking requirements in place to be able to track these. And also we're starting to see over the last couple of years a large spike in call volume to these places where what's happening is the staff is unable to handle the client. So we're coming in, having to assist the staff. And sometimes it's moving, taking a combative client and putting them in their bedroom because the staff just can't handle that. So we've been working with one of our frequent flyer places to work with them on a process on getting to the point where that client is too much for that facility and they're transitioning that client to another facility. So this gives us an opportunity to track these centers where they're at and also eliminate the unnecessary calls for service because, we've had calls where the client will look at them and says, no, I'm not doing that. They call the police. By instituting this excessive call volume, that would be reviewed much like the city alarm ordinance. It gives us some mechanisms to kind of control that call volume and work with the centers on making sure that they've got proper staffing.
Questions, Councilor?
Thank you, Chief. The city manager mentioned, I think, is addressing this. My concerns were that, for example, day programs for people with disabilities, with adults with mental retardation, safe houses for trafficked people would fall under this. And I want to make sure that it's very clear exactly what you're talking about in terms of these facilities. It does sound like you are going to be doing that. And finally, so the state is going to start licensing, they're going to be required to license these places, you mentioned?
Yes, but we don't know when. DHS is overwhelmed with these type of places right now because what's happening is you're getting these large corporations coming in and buying single-family homes and putting 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 clients in these homes with a very minimal staff, and the staff are simply overwhelmed.
Okay, so that's my concern, is how, to be very careful about how we define what these facilities are.
And part of the issue too is we have, larger facilities that are on the outskirts of the community. And so some of those facilities require at least minimum of sometimes 2 officers and a supervisor that's going to our most furthest location in the community, taking our resources out of the center of our community for a considerable amount of time. And when we have minimum staffing, that really, that hampers our response in other areas.
Are these nonprofit organizations that are purchasing these homes and putting residents in?
I believe they're mostly for-profit.
For-profit?
Yes.
Any other questions on this? Something we want to move forward with the discussion? Sorry, Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm getting more troubled the more I hear about this because certain conditions people are needing treatment for, I think some of them have to be in certain areas, so many, in other words, restricted from certain parts of the population of our city. I mean, if you've got somebody that's a child molester or something, you don't want that type of a home that's treating them near the school or places where kids are going to play.
No, ma'am, this doesn't have anything to do with sex offenders. That's clearly defined in our ordinance already as to where they can reside within the city. This is merely the mental health organizations that are dealing with these clients and putting them into single-family homes without any way of being able to track them on the city's behalf.
Okay, then, so my fear is semi-relieved that we still got a handle on where certain populations can go.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you.
Counselor Boston, Counselor McLeod.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with this. I think it's good to have this licensing process, and I think that the licensing fee makes sense as well. I am very familiar with the level of service that police departments across the nation provide to behavioral homes, and it can be really expensive. I think it'd be valuable to reassess this annually to see how we're doing with each of these different locations, to see the level of service that's being provided and if it's in line with the licensing fee, just to make sure that we have an appropriate approach or have a level of service that's matching what's being asked of those programs.
Basically like an annual pro forma based on cost versus expense?
Absolutely. So is a $250 fee annually for a program serving 500 to 100 clients, is that adequate? Are we trying to recoup costs for our services, or is this a licensing fee just for, to be
Just to cover
licensed?
admin.
You know what I mean? I think it's worth checking in to see how things are working.
This really gets to the crux of us being a quote-unquote service center and some of the unnecessary burdens put on financially. Counselor McLeod?
Yeah, I was looking for more detailed definitions of what the centers would actually look like. I know some places have a single resident, in a family-type setting. Would those also be included, like a shared living environment?
Yes, they would. In the second edition they'll be coming before you, we've clearly defined day treatment, and it's not live-in but residential treatment facilities, and those are taken right from state statute.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll bring this one back. It seems like there's enough here that want to see this again, so we'll have this prepared. We'll provide the definitions for you so you have a chance to take a look at that as well. Next would be under Chapter 14 again, but under business licensing. This is as it pertains to compliance with state and local law and rules. There was an update on an amendment that needed to be changed. Again, this is sometimes when we pass one ordinance, just cleaning up the language on another ordinance that references it. And this had to do with the updates that were done on July 29th, 2020 regarding marijuana licensing. And then also under section 14-658, the application process, adding language in there that includes renewals, so there's no misunderstanding that all applications regarding if they're new or renewals must submit their application fee. So this would be including renewals. This is, again, as it pertains to clarification on fees for marijuana licensing.
Is this our current practice?
That's our current practice. That was what was adopted. It just wasn't clarified.
Okay.
Hey, I got a question on this, just from a sense of conformity, when we're looking at categories, and they might not be in the same, but we have, and it's in here someplace, for example, our fees on renewal for liquor licenses, beer licenses, based upon size and so forth. Do we want conformity with that? Can we?
Well, it would be
Or is
nice on
flat
some,
fee?
but a lot of it has to do with the type of license that they're requesting, because it does fall with the definitions under the state statute. The marijuana, we wouldn't want every business to do what we're doing with marijuana. I think that this is a higher threshold, I guess you could say, on some of these, because they require a lot more work on staff end to ensure the background checks and site inspections and all that's being done. So that's why the fee is higher. Where if it was just a typical license, we might change that amount.
But I mean, just like restaurants and clubs, I'm looking for it right now, the fees are substantially higher there than they are for marijuana businesses.
This is just the application, not the actual license.
Okay, so this is the application fee versus a licensing fee, I understand.
The
Okay,
licensing fee for marijuana, some of them could be up to $5,000, Sue. So
perfect.
this is the application itself.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of times the staff is also checking, because there's so many different owners within marijuana licenses, is checking the different owners as well, so. All right, seeing nothing more on that, we'll keep moving. Emergency management. This one I asked staff to review, primarily because we are in the middle of a pandemic and we've used this more frequently than we ever have. And they provided some recommendations. I also took a look at this and put some recommendations based on my interaction. One thing I can tell you is that we've been very fortunate through the pandemic that we've had a mayor that's been very available. The mayor has, during the onset of the pandemic, basically was here spending many, many hours working with staff on not just the emergency proclamation, but all other emergency orders that we were preparing. We're not always going to have that. In the past, we've had some mayors that just didn't have that bandwidth and that time to be able to do that, or that quick availability to come right in because there was an emergency order that needed to be passed. One thing with so what I'm getting at is under the proclamation of emergency. Currently, the language states that it's the mayor or the manager. And this is one that I brought forward. This wasn't staff, this is one I brought forward. Where it really, when defining whose role and authority, it's shared at this point. You would think, but it also doesn't say that. So a mayor, not necessarily this mayor, but a mayor could pass an emergency proclamation, and a city manager could also pass an emergency proclamation. There's nothing that says which one overrides the other. It says that you're going to do it after consultation with the council. So I went through and I took a look at a lot of ordinances. The only one that has this language is Lewiston, and I believe that was back when we did our changes. We did a lot of cut and paste of what Lewiston had in their ordinance. No one else has this language of any other community I looked at. All other communities, except smaller towns, has this as the manager because it's an immediate administrative response. Some of the smaller towns has selectmen. The entire select body, select person, would make that decision. They would call a special meeting and they would make that, take that in. I probably have, I don't know, at least 10 or so communities that have some modification, but it's always the city administrator, town manager, and then there's a order within that. So that if the town manager or city manager is not available, the next person that would do it would be, most cases, it's either the assistant, if they have one. Some of the smaller communities don't have it. Or it would drop down to the fire chief, police chief, finance director. There's a pecking order that goes in for succession on being able to place an order, because it really is an administrative kind of requirement. Some also have language, and this is something we could also talk about whether or not you would like to see this. Some have language that says, if the city manager places an emergency order, within 24 to 48 hours, there is a special meeting with the council scheduled to then confirm that emergency proclamation. So that way it's the council that's making that decision. So I bring that before you only because it wasn't an issue. This isn't an issue currently, because the mayor has worked closely with myself and obviously with Peter when he was here during this. I could just see it as a potential issue because I feel like the language is poor language. There's no one person that has authority. It doesn't even say the mayor and city manager would move forward with it. It's just or. So he could do it from home and send it out, and I could do it from my office and send it out, and it would be sending mixed messages. So,
And as you think about this, let me just kind of piggyback on what Phil just said. And this is, normally you do an after-action review after the action, after a crisis and so forth. But it's good to talk about. There has, I think since the riots of 1930 here on Main Street, been a declaration of emergency in Auburn, or the new Auburn fire in 1933, 35. So it's a long period of time has happened. Things have changed. Right now, we think of an emergency as a pandemic, because that's what we're in. But when this was written, that was probably the last thing that they were thinking of. In the scope of it, it was right after 9/11, Cold War. We have mention here of civil defense forces. I don't know if people realize that right now I could form a civil defense force made up of volunteers and paid staff, and we're out there armed and moving, okay? That's not needed during a pandemic. Armed insurrection, terrorism, invasion by a foreign enemy, yeah, all that's needed. So you've got to think about how the definition of this is really broad and what's the desired intent. Personal experiences in the last and during this current state of emergency, I absolutely agree with Phil. There's some clarity that needs to happen, namely speed and essence on an emergency. For example, I think that we should have language saying that if a governor or president declares a state of emergency in which the city is inside of that zone, that automatically triggers us into a state of emergency and things trigger. Saving minutes is critical on larger scale type disasters or emergencies. Some of these are going to be local, i.e. a flood in the 80s here in the Androscoggin, fire in New Auburn, and so forth, or localized, i.e. Let's say a train derailment. We're talking about the standard operating procedures of that. What happened if a train derailed in the middle of our downtown? It's an immediate emergency, right? Very localized, though. So I do think there needs to be some thought put into this. As of, the mayor taking a back seat, I will say that I probably put in 1,000 hours this past year on this, and all needed. I probably could have put another 1,000 hours on this. Phil and I and Peter before spent a lot of time. A lot of things need to get done. A lot of things need to be mapped out. We've been very lucky, though, because the communication is good, it's present, it's there. You all have to make the decision on the powers that the mayors in the future are entrusted with, okay? And that's a critical point. As I was talking to Phil about this earlier, it's almost that I wish that, when people during an election for the next mayor would use this emergency and use this portion of our ordinance and our charter to see what would you do if elected and how would you lead this city in the face of a crisis, as broad and varied as that could be. Because I think it's an important litmus test. And I don't think that people don't necessarily think of what the mayor can do, but they need to, because it's not just a figurehead. It's an important position. And when you look at mayors outside of Maine, in all my meetings with National League of Cities, other mayors, you look at strong governments, you look at strong leaders, they're the mayors, along with a strong city council. And the council gets stronger as the mayor gets stronger. Communications increase. And you could probably make an argument that weakening the position of mayor to bring it in line with other weak mayorships around the state could possibly actually just devalue local government and home rule further. Those are just some of the thoughts that come to mind on this. There definitely needs to be some work done on this for clarification, without a doubt. And then everything else I said. So think about that, and I'd love to hear what everybody says about that. Start off on the right, Councilor Carey.
I see the point in with talking about this, but I would rather see the chain of command, as Phil said, making sure that there's the mayor or the manager with consultation from the council. I like leaving that in there because it delineates the jobs better. The council has the final say, but the mayor or the manager can do it. And if the manager's not here, then it would be the manager's next in line. So I see the need for cleaning up the language, but not changing the order.
Councilor Zani?
So Councilor Carey, are you saying to have both the mayor and the manager declare a state of emergency?
They could either, or the mayor or the city manager. So it's either.
Yeah, I think
Because
that's,
I don't want to take anybody out of the chain of command, especially us, because we're the ones that are in charge of running the city. The management and the rest of the city staff works for us, basically. So I like keeping that whole chain of command in there.
so I think the confusion is if you have the mayor and the manager. So I'll just say, I think having the manager be the person make the decision, but including whether it's 24 or 48 hours, that the council has to then affirm that declaration, because that is what our job is, to be able to make sure. And I think one of the things that's happened in the state right now is that some people don't feel they've had a voice in the state of emergency that was cleared at the state level. So I would not want that to happen in our community. So I would say the manager, and then have something in there about the council coming together to be able to then debate or confirm.
How about this, though? And I'm going to throw a hypothetical, because this is the type of thinking we need to do. 4 of you you're dead. It's an emergency. We lose quorum because of death, okay? Incapacitation, non-able to transport, unable to form a quorum to debate within 24 or 48 hours. And I say that because this is serious. It goes well beyond a pandemic, and it goes to the root of what an emergency can be. And how do you craft something that actually takes into account what a true emergency could be, what it looks like? And not to be confrontational or anything, but I think it's something that we all need to think about. And I think the checks and balances are important there as well, because if the council can't get together in 24 hours or 48 hours or 30 days or ever, or for a period of time, hopefully, God forbid. So.
Yeah, I think, Brian, you said and, so that I think it's critical that the elected executive of the city by the people of Auburn has an equal say in an emergency. If that's what that ordinance is stating, that it's either or.
Yeah, currently
Is that what that's saying?
it's just saying or.
Yeah,
So
it's
the
not-
mayor or the manager. I think the good example that the mayor is referred to is, you have a derailment of and that's the thing that we plan for probably the most as a city, a train derailment in downtown with hazardous material, and you have to respond to that, to move immediate resources to the level that we would need. You need to have an emergency proclamation, and so. That's an immediate process. So if you're going to have manager I would say you need to have some language, because there's language in here that if the manager's not available, what happens? I would say you need some language in there that if the mayor's not available, what that happens. Because if you just put it at the end, we're back to a real challenge.
And I think
You
it's
do that with
critical.
like either the mayor, the city and the mayor will jointly, unless either one of which is incapacitated, and at which time it will flow, or time is of the, there's some language you could put in there, I think, for that.
But I do think it's critical in this situation that the elected officials by the people be perceived and have the actual equal input onto
Mine gets back to, I spent too long in the military, growing up in a military family. You have a chain of command. And the mayor sits as the head of the council, which is the civilian part of our government. And the manager sits as the staff issue of the government. So having them both in charge and having them both have the ability to make that determination, again, with cleaning up the language to make sure that it's workable, I think is the best way to do it. I just, it follows a succinct path that we, that's the way we do things. And if anything happens with where one person is gone, then it automatically flows to the next person. If this is, if this room was set up and this was the way it went, if something happens to the manager, then it goes to Tim. If something happens to Tim, then it goes to Holly. So it follows a chain. So.
Roll call order, but Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our form of government, how we run our city, was set up this way for a reason. And because of how it's set up, I love everything I've heard so far. I don't feel good giving all authority to the city manager, and I'm more comfortable with it being but I like the language in case one or the other isn't available, then the other one has the ability to do what they need to do the emergency measures. I'm afraid of cutting the mayor out of the whole equation because with Phil being the city manager, I have confidence an emergency could be handled and dealt with because he's had the experience in his other line of work and his life and stuff. Other city managers, I don't think they would buckle under the pressure or could carry it out as well as the current manager. And I'm trying to think of preparing for future councils if we don't have somebody as knowledgeable as our good city manager, that we need to have the mayor there as the safety valve in order to make sure that we're protected and took care of right. So that is why I want a as close as I can working relationship with our mayor and our city manager and with our input.
Councilor, we haven't heard from you. Do you have anything?
Sure. So,
Don't let me twist your arm on that. But according to Roberts, I should give everybody a chance
no,
to speak.
absolutely. So inversely, we could have an unhinged mayor who just declares an emergency whenever they feel like it. So I think either we're doing either or some sort of conjunction would probably be the better choice if we're going to keep both in there. So that way there's that little bit of balance. I don't think it makes, I don't foresee that it would have made a difference if the city manager had declared our emergency. You still would have put in 1,000 hours and the city would be where it is today. You know what I mean? I don't think it would make a substantive difference on what the language here is, but I can see the future points that it could go either way. And it still could go either way, regardless of how this comes out. I have some other changes, but that I wanted to talk about, but not specifically to that part.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of changes that we probably all can make and make it tighter. Councilor Zani, then Councilor Boss.
What if the mayor and the manager disagree?
Yeah, that's my question.
And I think then you have,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
what if the mayor and the manager disagree about the declaration? And Councilor Carey talks about chain of command. There's one person at the top in a true chain of command. And so I think that's what we need to look at. I think being able to bring the council within a short period of time to, as I mentioned, reinforce is the way to go about it. Because then we have say, it is our job. But I'm just afraid if there's if there's disagreement, which there might be, and also to remember that this is a weak mayor form of government that we have in this city that is in our charter. So I would defer to the city manager and then bringing people together to be able to have a say within a reasonable amount of time.
Councilor Boss?
Similar feedback, which is that there needs to be one person, in my opinion, because if there's conflict, then we need to have provisions for how we would resolve that.
Yeah, so you got a lot of feedback on this, Phil.
I've got a lot of feedback. What I will do is I'll do a little bit more research for you. Part of that research is regarding the proclamation. I think what would be helpful to know is that the proclamation is very different than, if you remember, all the orders that came out. The proclamation is really to state there's an emergency in the city. By that proclamation, now triggers and releases services, whether that be at the federal or at the state level. That's really what that looks like, and don't think of it as all those other orders that kind of came through and you voted on. That's not about any of that. It's really to say, hey, there's a threat and an emergency that's here in the community. We're going to declare it. Now, some of those public safety agencies, emergency management can get on the phone and say, it's been declared, please send your resources. So
And that
that's really what this is about.
And that communications is critical too, and you ideally, in a perfect world during an emergency, you want, and I've been in these emergencies, Phil has too, when you're doing, roles come into place. You game things out, you look at things, how does this work, who's calling who, who's organizing what, when do you stay out of the way, when do you get involved? You know, and then, you know, always having the kind of because the mayor's elected by the people. City manager is hired by you. So there is two different kind of parallels there, okay? I don't report to the council, per se, okay? I report to the residents of the city of Auburn. And that's a fundamental difference between myself and the city manager. But deconfliction with this and the charter needs to happen, because there's language in the charter as well that this supports, and that changes in this could affect that. But I think I mean, it's an interesting topic to talk about, and I'm glad we can talk about it, actually.
What would be the recourse if there was not, in 24 hours, a quorum of city councilors? Half the city's cut off, he can't get here, you know, what?
A lot of times, I mean, it would have to be really Auburn-specific for there not to be some state rules that would trigger what we could do. It really would have to be Auburn-specific. And there are certain things that can take place, and the council could take action on. Sue, I'm going to look for you. You still need a quorum to call the meeting, correct? Which would be at least 4.
4.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, Sue, do you have any thoughts on that? What would happen? The meeting wouldn't take place and we would fall under emergency order.
Yeah.
So there is that piece, so.
That was what? I couldn't understand.
You wouldn't be able to meet. You'd be still operating as no one there to be able to call the meeting, so you would be operating under the emergency order. And the emergency order then goes down when you look at 1623 for emergency powers of officials. And again, this is when an emergency or disaster exists. And again, also sometimes appear imminent, because we've had that, we believe this is happening. Sometimes this happens just on a storm, just so that we're clear on that. Sometimes this is declared as a storm, because once we declare it, then there's FEMA money that we can now draw from for that, but we had to declare it as an emergency. So sometimes that happens on a regular basis, and that just happens. You know, it hasn't happened maybe with you, because what will end up taking place, you would have received a notification. I can't remember our last storm event that we had to call on this, but Councilman McLeod.
So I had 2 items. 1622A, it says at the end, the proclamation shall be filed with the clerk within 24 hours. Is there also a mechanism to have that proclamation posted and disseminated to our citizens as well?
Yeah, kind of
Just to
posted
make
with
sure
the clerks. And online.
Yeah, just online, or, you know,
I
just
think
say,
we have
here
some
it is.
language regarding that.
Posted in the town square with a town crier announcing end of days.
Something, yeah, just anything, just so
Zombies are
somebody
coming.
knows
Or the
depending.
LED board.
And the other question I had was on the emergency powers, the 1623. You just mentioned during any period of emergency disaster or an imminent disaster that could come, would that all be tied to a declared proclamation? This section would only happen if there was a proclamation of emergency declared, right?
Yeah, it's saying it may include these items.
Right, so wouldn't it only happen during a declared proclamation? I'm just wondering about that language there, of having those 3 different distinct separate sections, instead of just saying during any declared emergency, X, Y, and Z, the mayor, blah, 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 propagates, and keeps going from there. Because that tightens that up to me, that we either have an emergency or we don't.
Right, imminent,
That's all.
is imminent the word that is confusing, maybe?
Imminent one's the one that's got a lot of ambiguity there, because an imminent, you're taking intelligence, best intelligence, and you're trying to be proactive planning, right?
Right. But I mean, if it's imminent enough, then we should be, you know, having an emergency proclamation for that.
If it's imminent enough, we should have the entire council being called too.
Right.
You know, if it's if at all possible.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot for you to,
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, I think I'm getting some sense, I think it is, we are kind of mixed on it. We'll probably do our best to come up with some language, bring it before, and then allow the council to kind of make modifications as you see fit. The other piece that the staff came up with was regarding the termination of a proclamation, that one setting it so that this is more in alignment with what the state has. It's a 30 days, it goes into effect for 30 days unless it's vacated earlier. And then what that does allow you to do, though, it makes sure that you're reviewing it every 30 days. I can tell you, I've only reviewed it, maybe I think the last time I looked at it might have been when we were making some looks, we were looking at some of it back in June. I don't know as if I've looked at it since. So it does require that 30 days, review that. Anything that needs to be taken out, modified, adjusted would then take place, which is good.
That's going to be council approved every 30 days?
That would come back before the council. Yeah, because there's no emergency, there's no imminent concern at that point. And what's happened since that emergency is you've now passed orders. Those orders would then come back to you to then vacate those. Yeah.
Mr. Manager, do we still belong to the emergency management? Isn't there a pecking order there that when you're into something fairly big, like you talk about the train, if that train came across here with a chemical, us sitting here tonight would probably be dead in 10 minutes. We're in the lowest hole in the city, so you probably wouldn't be in charge of anything, and none of us sitting here would be either. So worrying about who's going to be in charge at that point, I think kicks over to the emergency management, because they would kick in first.
So emergency management is certainly what we use. It's a county emergency management, but it's also regional. So, or it could be regional. Ours is specifically county. There is a line of when that kicks in and when it doesn't. There are certain incidents that are Auburn related, and then we reach out to emergency management to bring those resources to the table when need be.
I remember when, going back quite a few years ago, they were kind of the people in charge of making sure they called everything into order. Managers had a place that they would go to over there to be safe, and
We still have all that, yes. But most of the time, that is more of an incident that takes place for the region.
yeah, but like the ice storm, that was something that nobody was ready for. They took that over, we kind of fit into the pieces, and from there, we were supposed to build a great thing to work together, and I'm sure that you people have worked on it since I've been gone, that's for
Yeah,
sure. But
yeah, that still happens, and we work pretty closely. We have systems in place. We have every piece of equipment in the county available on a GIS platform, so that if we needed an additional grader because of an emergency we had, I can tell you exactly where all the graders are located within the county and be able to pull that resource in. So lots happened since the ice storm, but yes, that is the platform we use.
that would be something great in the future that I think would be nice if we actually all went right through that, so we know what all the pecking orders are, because there's a lot to that. I was involved with that for years, and I don't know where it's gone since then. But going back to this here, I'd just like to put my piece in it. I think as an elected mayor of our city, definitely he needs to be in the very top of this, making decisions on an emergency and working with the manager side by side, if that's possible. And if he's not here, then the manager still should be making communications on what we should do and shouldn't do, and hopefully they don't decide to be on opposite sides of the fence when it comes in an emergency for the city.
Just want to, something that the city manager said that I think is clarifying is he or she will declare the emergency, and then after that, all of the different actions that take place after that, the mayor was and would be very intimately involved. So it's just the declaration by one person, then everything else that happens to that after that involves the mayor and other people. So that declaration doesn't mean that he's making, or she's making all the decisions after that.
So the thing about this one, just going back, the past city manager and I declared it mutually. We declared the emergency together after consultation. We actually, I think, declared it internally 3 times without releasing it and without actually doing it, and just kept holding it and holding it and holding it. But that was a lot of the communication that's going back and forth. Good topic. I'm going to close off this part of the workshop. Oh, you have something else, folks?
Sorry, yeah, we've got a couple more things.
Oh, we do? I
Okay,
thought that was it.
yeah.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I had language for you to look at. The other ones I just want to put on the table regarding conversation. Councilor Lasagna, thank you, made me think of one that I had written down but I hadn't talked about was if the council, after Brian and I have been going through this, we really think that pronoun inclusion's important for this document, and it's not there currently. And so if the council is in agreement with that, anywhere where it says just, most of this is all referred to he, him, his. We really should have an ordinance that's pronoun inclusion, and that should include he or her, and he or she rather, and him or her, and fix that language within our ordinance. So if everybody's in agreement with that, that's something we can just have Municode, who we contract with, do a find and replace and just clean up all that language. The couple other things just to bring before you. When it comes to departments, currently there's only like 3 or 4 departments that's listed in the ordinance. We can include all the departments that currently exist with some sample, really, I think it's just there, basically what their charge is as a department. That's really what you have currently. That doesn't exist in here. If you'd like that, we can make sure we include that, so all your departments are listed in your ordinance. So that's one. We can go ahead and draft that up if I see most people are fine with that. I'm not sure why it was done that way. Boards, commissions, and committees, that discussion on adopting that recommendation, that'll be presented by the ad hoc committee. That'll come back before you. This will clean up everything that we need to talk about from chapters 1 through 16. The citation system of code enforcement, that's currently being reviewed by the attorney and by staff. That's also tying in with our existing software system. We need all that to be the same, because if our practice is separate from the ordinance, and that becomes an issue. So that's being reviewed. That'll come back before you, which also includes the review and appeal of administrative decisions, because that all has to do with code violations. So, Chapter 10, aviation, I reached out to the airport manager. We have this in our section because we have an airport in Auburn. I've asked him to take a look at the ordinance. He's going to make recommendations for the council on Chapter 10. Buildings and building regulations are being reviewed currently by staff. That'll come back before you. Automobile graveyards and junkyards is being reviewed by the city attorney, so we'll have any changes on that. Already proposed the language for Article 8, which was junkyard collectors. Article 12, massage establishments and massage therapists. We need some clarifying language. I'll work on that. We have some issues when it comes to, if I'm a therapist, I'm also the licensee. If I'm getting an application, do all my therapists then need to pay for the license? I think that's part of the issue, right, Sue? And so whether or not we want that or not, we're going to do a little bit more research on that just to bring that back before you.
Up to and including why they'd have to pay a fee?
Up to including why would they have to pay a fee if the owner's already paid a fee?
To the state to be licensed?
Then maybe it's more of if I'm an operation that has 1 to 5 therapists, then my license should be based off from that, not based off from each one of those therapists having to apply. Well, they all apply because we have to make sure they have their license with the state, but each one of them should not have to pay a fee. I think that's what we're getting at, to help eliminate some of that. Taxi cabs, transportation network companies have changed what's taking place across the country when it comes to taxi cabs. The discussion I'd like to have with you is leveling that playing field. So our taxi cabs aren't being mandated to meet this level of regulation that Uber, Lyft, and any of these other transportation network companies, they don't need to. They're following we don't have the language for that. We can look at language that does have some of that. It's a big challenge. It's being done currently, obviously, in some cities, like larger cities. But I think what we really want to promote is just good transportation. And so we currently have one cab business left, I think, in the Twin Cities. And he's paying out, a decent amount of cost to operate. And this would be if we had multiple as well. I'd be recommending the same thing, but I think we should eliminate that, put some language in that includes any type of transportation network company, which would include a cab, and just meet that threshold, but not necessarily having this regulation that we currently have.
And just for everybody's knowledge, I am a registered Uber driver, yes. And I've never picked up a fare, but I did it because I was curious. There's a lot of regulations that go into Uber. You do have to pass background checks, license checks. They check your, insurance, your driving history, and so forth, which is good. But do we have agreement? I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding to get conformity between our quote-unquote livery cab companies and the independent third parties, livery, Uber, Lyfts.
So we'll have language in that does require them to meet either at the state level or what a transportation network company would have to meet. They should meet that same threshold, but nothing greater than that. Just ensure we have good background checks. Those have come in handy in the past, ensuring that they're insured, all those things. Garage sales, garage yard and barn sales. This is one that if we're maintaining this, we should have discussion about. I think it was recommended, Councilman McLeod, I think in a conversation that we had regarding that, the 2 weekends prior to spring cleanup, to not have a fee for that, allow people to be able to have their yard sales, clean up as much as they can, and then whatever they don't sell stays on the side of the road for spring cleanup.
The biggest yard sale in New England. We could market that. That's a great one, Councilor McLeod. Nicely done. Thoughts on that?
Auburn, Maine, the biggest yard sale.
Just for 2 weeks.
All right.
Biggest 2-week yard sale.
That's all, so 1 through, this is a lot that you're gonna have back before you, but 1 through 16 completed, and then, Mayor, I think you have conversations regarding how we tackle the next section.
Yeah, this is a lot, and we haven't really scratched the surface, but it was good practice. After consultation with the city manager, I'll be calling a special meeting for next Monday here at 5:30, though that time, I'd like to put it out to you. If we all can do it earlier, we can do it earlier. The sole purpose of that meeting will be to, not the sole, but the primary purpose will be to go over Chapter 61, Appendix A, fees and charges. This will be a workshop in which council talks about, I'll lead off, going through each one of our fees and charges. And we're talking everything from dog fees to electrical outlet fees, rehabilitation permits, and so forth. It's a lot of fees and charges. But this way we can go through it, look at it, talk about them in general and specifically. Staff will be there to provide any color if we need it, but also to listen to what we're saying in order to make sure that they're presenting and they're putting together the right information based upon what we want to hear. Okay? It's the way of streamlining. Yes.
Will we get sort of a cover sheet on those, just like we have for a reason of changing, so that there's some context? No, we're just going to
No,
look at them.
we're going to literally go, yeah, if you go in our ordinances, Chapter 61, Appendix A, we're just going to go in sequence and just go. That way we don't miss anything.
Okay.
There's no preconceived notion or self-fulfilling prophecy. We're just going through it. We'll talk about each one. Some we won't talk about, whatever those might be. Then we will take some time also, and we'll be talking about maybe a secondary workshop item on some zoning. That's a referral from the planning board just last Tuesday, just to get that out so we can truncate some of our meeting the following two.
Question on these fees, are they clearly highlighted in the budget as what percent, like how much revenue the city gets from these fees on a yearly? Is that something you could provide for that meeting?
We can provide what we bring in for fees, absolutely.
That would be good. I'd like to know what the total amount is as we're looking through each of these.
Yeah, I'll have to look at the intergov system to see if we can break it out based off from the type of fee that was collected. I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah. Like
I
it's
can get you
different,
the full
we don't need
total.
excise taxes for registration of vehicles, but what are all the construction,
Electrical permit fees, right?
electrical
Rehabilitation.
permit fees and, yeah.
I'll
What
have
that
to
total
dig
is would be,
If we can, I'll print that report right out so you'll have it.
Great, thank you.
If there's anything else that people could think about it, let's send an email out to myself and the city manager, see if there's something that we can collect that's feasible to be collected, or if it has to be pushed off, okay? Time on this, I default to 5:30, but do we want to do 4, 4:30, 5, 7? Thoughts?
5, it's got to be after 5.
Early, I hear early.
Really?
Make it before 5:30. Have to see-
Before, you're not sure if you can make it before 5:30?
Right, I'm not sure. I'll have to check my schedule because I have regular meetings with hospital administration. And I'm not sure if there's one on next Monday. I'll find out and let you know right away.
Well, 5. That way you don't miss it all. And we can talk between now and then too. If you see some stuff that you want to hit in the beginning part of this, we'll make sure that's noted. Okay? Very good, good. Let's do 5 o'clock. Done. And you're all set?
I'm all set, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'm not going to call this workshop to an end. Next. We have an executive session that's slated for later on tonight. We have a couple minutes. I'm thinking this executive session will last 5 minutes. This is on my topic. So I'd like to do hold on, do it now. Okay, so at this point, let me just read it correctly. At this point, we have an executive session. It's a personnel matter pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
A motion for Councilor Gary. Do I have a second?
second.
Oh, Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Okay, we're now in executive session by vote of 7-0.
25th, right?
After the Pledge of Allegiance, please stay standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag I'd like to ask for a moment of silence tonight in memory of Officer Brian Sicknick. He was a member of the Capitol Hill Police Force that was killed in the Capitol on January, 6. So please join me in this moment of silence. Thank you. May his memory be eternal, and may we also learn and never forget that violence has no place in civil discourse in this country, and that we as elected officials represent the best of what civil discourse is in a nonviolent, non-adversarial way. Thank you very much. Okay, first on the agenda, we have 3 consent items. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Councilor McLeod and a second from Councilor Walker. Show of hands, all those in favor. Consent items passed by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have the minutes of the January 4th, 2021 regular City Council meeting. Are there any corrections? None, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the January 4th, 2021 regular City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Carrier, second by Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Opposed? We now accept the minutes. Now on to communications, presentations, and recognition. As we queue this up, let me just announce that every 2 years, I give a State of the City address, and this is my second State of the City address, and I want to thank staff for helping me put together. You'll notice that this is pre-recorded. I wanted to make sure that it was done and ready to go before this meeting, just in case. Proper planning, I think, helps. You also have printed copies of the State of the City address. I've given copies to members of the media around the state for their, so they have it for record. And if any resident wants a written copy, by all means, please just ask. The communications department or myself will be happy to provide. So thank you. Welcome to Auburn Hall. I'm Mayor Jason Levesque, and as you can see, this State of the City address is being recorded in my office here at Auburn Hall. Like you, I'm abiding by state executive orders, and I take comfort in knowing that the wonderful people that make up this great city are represented in this office. I fully believe that our faith in the future of Auburn and the foundation established by our predecessors will guide us towards greatness for generations to come. I want to take a moment today to thank City Manager Phil Krall and our dedicated city staff for working so hard to keep our residents safe and to keep everything running as smoothly as possible during these unprecedented times. Team Auburn truly is exceptional. I also extend my thanks to the members of the City Council for showing great leadership and courage throughout this pandemic. They continue to ask hard questions, put the people of Auburn first, and tackle difficult subjects with thoughtfulness. Most importantly, I want to thank Auburn residents and visitors for their perseverance throughout the past year. It has been tumultuous and challenging to say the least, but you're an inspiration to us all. There are also some very special, deeply dedicated groups I want to recognize today. To the Friends of Mount Appetite, who partnered with city staff, took over 300 acres of beautiful yet underutilized city park and turned it into a world-class biking and hiking destination. Thank you. To the Auburn Ski Association, which has worked quietly and steadfastly for years to support winter activities in our city, providing opportunities for residents of all ages, regardless of background. Thank you. To Auburn Suburban Baseball and Softball, for making your vision for our new state-of-the-art athletic facility on Stevens Mills Road a reality. Thank you. That facility will be an asset to our communities for generations to come. To all the fans, coaches, players, and business supporters of Auburn sports programs, You make our dream of a culture of sport with its lessons in competition, physical activity, and pursuit of greatness a reality for so many. Thank you. To the Auburn Business Association, Auburn Exchange Club, Optimist Club, Masons, and countless other civic and fraternal groups who work tirelessly to beautify our city, honor our veterans, and feed our families, and support our youth through scholarship and mentoring, thank you. To our small business owners, for working hard and struggling to stay open throughout the pandemic. Your innovation, your entrepreneurial spirit is an inspiration to us all. For keeping your doors open, providing goods and services to our city, despite the sometimes punitive and reactive restrictions you have endured, thank you. To the residents who volunteer their time, skills, and enthusiasm, whether our emergency food bank or one of our countless city committees and boards, you represent what's best about the city. In fact, you're truly the one shaping our future, and it does not go unnoticed. Thank you. My last State of the City message was in January of 2019. Since then, there have been many highs and lows. We celebrated Auburn's 150th anniversary in an epic year-long display of community pride, a celebration of our history, honor, and heritage. And we also face unprecedented challenges, from a turbulent election cycle to a pandemic. We have all worked so hard to overcome these challenges. And while we still have some ground to cover, we have shown that through determination and hard work, we can weather anything that comes our way. Life will continue. It's which path we choose that will define our city and our lives in the future. In 2020, despite the challenges and trials, we have accomplished so much to be proud of. I don't want that to be overlooked as we face the crisis at hand. Within both our city and school government, we have new leadership, and you can be confident that the teams in place are truly expert in their respective fields. They have the will, the knowledge, and the ability to make incredible things happen. I hope you find that as exciting as I do. Our schools have done an exemplary job balancing education, the mental and physical health of more than 3,300 students, the construction of our new high school, and countless other things. We are fortunate to have so many caring and talented people protecting and nurturing our city's future. There is more to do, though, and I look forward to seeing the school department and administration coming together to further enhance our education during these trying times. Your representatives on the City Council have also been busy, from passing a budget that lowered or kept flat your property taxes to making smart investments in equipment and infrastructure. This council continues to impress and encourage with their focus on quality of life, strategic planning, equity, and fiscal responsibility. On the economic front, Auburn has been setting records almost monthly. In fact, Auburn will soon see over 1 million new square feet of industrial and retail development throughout the city, from the new Target and Chipotle on Center Street to the Holy Donut on Minot Avenue, to the expansion and hiring of countless existing and new companies throughout our city. Simply put, that means more jobs, more opportunity for those who already live here and for those who are and will be moving here in the not too distant future. Speaking of that, we have also had record growth in home building and rehabilitation. You can't miss the transformation when you drive around town these days. I'm delighted to report that we have completed and dedicated our beautiful new Anniversary Park in New Auburn, which features a huge new bell tower that is the forever home of the historic and treasured bells of St. Louis Church. The tower is surrounded by more than 300 commemorative bricks, and the park will be a special place for us to gather as a community for years to come. In the near future, expect that bell tower will be temporarily dwarfed by cranes erecting new buildings at the heart of our new Auburn Village. While we have accomplished so much, much remains to be done. We still have problems within our city, from generational poverty to food insecurity, to a lack of affordable and equitable housing, to an above-average property tax rate. Now, I truly believe that the best and most efficient solution to our problems is to promote growth, encourage and allow for more investment, specifically the construction and sale of market-rate homes. And when I say more, I mean more. Approximately 2,000 more homes over the next 5 to 7 years need to be built. These will not be faceless houses. These will be homes with real, hardworking people raising families and building memories. I want us to embrace this solution and stop making excuses for our lack of action. We do not have to choose between competing interests. We can, in fact, have our cake and eat it too. We can balance our commitment to protect our environment with our desire to grow our downtown and our residential and industrial base. Auburn's population is around 24,000 people, spread out over nearly 70 square miles of land. Now that's bigger than Portland, South Portland, Westbrook, and Cape Elizabeth combined. We have the space. We have the perfect location within the state and the infrastructure to comfortably handle an additional 2,000 new market rate homes. What happens if we achieve this? For starters, our taxes will go down by approximately 20%. We are already paying for and have the infrastructure needed to handle this influx of residents. New industry and commerce will locate here, further enhancing our quality of life and decreasing our reliance upon residential property taxes. Our existing businesses will have more employees and customers, so they will thrive, not just survive. In short, our city will become more sustainable and robust. This is not wishful thinking. It's a reality, backed by data and examples across the United States, and it can be our reality here in Auburn. By revisiting our archaic, protectionist, and in my opinion, biased zoning ordinances, we will promote equity for all residents, allowing them the opportunity that others have had, regardless of race, religion, or creed. We need to be fair to those who work hard, but are currently unable to achieve their fullest potential. Expanded housing supply will keep home prices affordable, allowing our residents to achieve their American dream of home ownership. Now, data shows that this is the best path out of generational poverty. Who are we to pick those that can and can't raise their families here because we continue to promote unfair zoning ordinances when we have the ability to change them? Last year, we were at a crossroads. I feel that we chose the path least traveled, the path that allows Auburn to choose to follow, to lead toward the belief that individuals, not government, will ensure that our city continues to grow and become vibrant and sustainable for future generations. I want us to strip away needless regulations and red tape. When we do, the people in our community will do the right thing, and we will all grow and prosper. I believe that the time to put our promises into action is now. We must stay focused on growth as the only true and honest way towards prosperity. Prosperity for all of our residents, and not just a select few. Investments from the private sector should continue to be sought out, encouraged, and embraced. Some critics of growth and equity will denounce developers as some Scrooge-like villain. They will use fear tactics and emotions to perpetuate a negative and toxic stereotype. It's not true. Ask yourself, what developer would invest money into a city with the purpose of hurting the very thing that drew their investment? None. My promise to those looking to invest in Auburn: come here with an open mind. Know that you will find a willing and welcoming partner at City Hall. Know that you will find regulatory consistency within our government. Know that once you commit to our city, the residents will welcome you and take pride in your success. Take Chipotle's national record-setting opening day as a great example. And so, to the City Council, in the year ahead, I ask you to propose and approve changes to our comprehensive plan and our zoning ordinances, making them more equitable for all residents, promoting growth and investment. I ask you to join me in supporting and encouraging developers who want to invest in our city, not only because of profit, but for the opportunity to help make this city better and more appealing. I ask you to focus on proposing solutions and compromise versus partisan talking points and the will of special interest groups who are narrowly focused on their mission statement versus the growth of our city. I ask you to make it a goal to revise our regulations, stripping all but those that are imperative for the health and safety of those that live, work, and play in our city. And lastly, I ask you to work towards a budget that requires no increase to our already high property tax rate. Weigh each investment against its potential return. To our regional partners, I ask you to continue to work with us on a variety of endeavors, but do so in a fair and equitable fashion. The time of relying on the generosity of Auburn taxpayers to subsidize your undertakings is at an end. Fairness and honesty will prevail above all else. To our city administration and staff, thank you for taking policy
and making it reality. I know it can be a thankless job, but I appreciate your ongoing efforts to grow our city. The future will hold challenges as you continue to make the government more efficient, but keep moving forward, and the results will make us all stronger. To our schools and educators, you are challenged this year like no other, and I cannot begin to thank you all for the hard work you have done over the past 10 months. But the reality is that we are and have been is not working. I applaud our new superintendent, Dr. Brown, and our school committee chair for leading the conversation forward and proposing new ways for Auburn to have one of the top school systems in the state. Embrace change, embrace a unified path forward, and do not believe the tired excuses that have been used to justify historically poor performance for a decade. Your city and its youth are depending on results, not excuses, to succeed and build a better life for themselves and their families. To our great volunteer groups and residents, do more great things. Never hesitate to ask me for support, to help find solutions to problems in order to make your dreams and all of our dreams a reality. And lastly, to the people of Auburn, you have a decision to make. Do you want to move forward together towards prosperity? Is Auburn to lead, or are we to follow? I have confidence that your decision will be, as it has been over the last 150 years, for our city to move forward with no backward steps. I look forward to when we can all gather again as a community. I look forward to co-hosting Maine's bicentennial parade in Auburn this year. I look forward to a return to normalcy. I look forward to spending time with you, my friends and neighbors, at our local businesses, debating potholes and taxes without a mask after 9 p.m. And I look forward to together celebrating New Year's 2022 in our beautiful downtown. Because I know that when we look back at 2021, it will be with a sense of pride and accomplishment. And I trust that history will judge us favorably on our ability to overcome and grow and to thrive in the face of adversity. Thank you for your continued trust and support as we move forward to a happy and healthy new year. It is a profound honor to be your mayor.
And that's it. Oh, thanks. A little bit different to do it pre-recorded. So that's my State of the City address again. You all have copies. Anybody who wants one can get one. I'd like to open this up to the next agenda item, which is council communications. I'll start on the left with Councilor Boss.
Thank you.
Councilor Lozani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really thank the mayor for your comments about what happened on January 6th. And I'd like to say that we're such a pivotal point in our nation's history. While it is important to look outward and acknowledge the deep cracks in our democracy and in our government that led to what happened, on January 6th, it is also vitally important to look inward at the cracks that may exist in our own communities. I hope that when we in Auburn speak of equity, we make sure that we look deeply into our community, our city, and our local government to expose what cracks may exist that prevent equity and equal access to resources like personal safety, food, safe housing, education, and access to clean water and nature. And to make sure that those who are charged with protecting these things are also looking at potential cracks within ourselves, within this community, and with our own commitment to each other. Thank you.
Councilor McLeod.
Nothing at this moment.
Councilor Gary. Councilor Milks.
Oh,
Did you have?
I thought you said carrier.
No, Gary. I'm sorry.
Sorry, nothing at this time, please.
Councilor Milks.
Nothing?
Walker.
Go ahead.
Gary.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, moving along. Mr. Manager, any council communications?
No, no communication.
Okay, I'm going to open this up to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. Members that would like to speak may do so just by stepping up to the podium over in the the community room, or by using the raise hand function on your Zoom.
Littering, improper disposal of weekly trash, and noncompliance of dog feces. Recently, during the Christmas and New Year's holiday, we had a bit of a miscommunication as to when to put the trash out for Christmas and for New Year. So some folks didn't put it out thinking it wasn't going to be picked up on Christmas Day, and not picked up the next day, and vice versa on anniversary. So it made with the winds at the time and the recent snow arrival, it made it's a serious mess in New Auburn. Anybody that lives there knows exactly what I'm talking about. A couple of years ago, Mr. Cousins and I tried to pass an ordinance that would reinforce the usage of proper containers with lids, and it was voted down. I think we need to readdress that so we can help us keep our city clean. And lastly, 2 days ago, I was in our new park with my dog, and we still don't have any signage there asking people to curb their dogs. And I picked up 3 piles of dog feces, and I should have picked up 4, but I ran out of bags. So we need to address that. Lastly, I'd like to read a note here from, it says, to whom it may concern, my name is Michael Roy, owner of Roy's Food Land. Larry Pelletier and I having to pick up trash on 3rd Street because of careless tenants near or on 3rd Street. Code enforcement should do something to help as soon as possible. Signed, Michael Roy. And he lists his phone number here if you want to contact him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelletier. There's no one on Zoom right now, so we're going to close the first open session of the evening. Now we have some unfinished business. We have order 01-01-04-2021, approving the PacGen TIF District number 26. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved?
Second?
Motion by Councilor Carrier, second by Councilor Boss. Just to remind you before I open this up to the public or internal, this is something that we tabled to this date in order for them to get some lines and everything drawn correctly. Anybody from the public like to speak? I don't think we have anyone else in the council chamber, or excuse me, community room, and no one online.
No one's online, Mr. Mayor, if I could just speak to this matter.
Well, of course, please.
I would just ask that the council, when you voted to table this, it was specific to a date. What should have been was to table this with no date, and so indefinitely, if I would request that the council go ahead and move that to tabling indefinitely until they're prepared to come back forward with something. We will start the process again and make sure we have a public hearing.
So, in other words, this is not ready for final vote on the TIF district?
Correct.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay. At this point, is there any comment, or do we have a motion to table to a date indefinite?
That's, it's hard to understand.
Sorry.
The way that this was required was the way that it was tabled. We had to bring this back before the council because it was a date specific, which was today.
Yeah.
The intent when we had sought for it to be tabled was for it to be indefinite. So because of that date specific, we need to request it today for it to be tabled indefinitely, which would then
So I'd like to
make this a
move to
order.
table this indefinitely.
Thank you.
Second.
I got a motion by Councilor Milks to table this order indefinitely, and I got a second by Councilor McLeod. All those in favor? The motion is now tabled indefinitely. Next, we have Order 03-0104-2021, authorizing staff to enter into an agreement with FB Environmental Associates for the evaluation of ordinances applicable to the protection of the Lake Auburn watershed.
So moved?
Second.
A motion by Councilor Boss, second by Councilor Walker. Anybody in the public like to speak? Is there anyone online? None being. Bring back council. Councilor Lasagna.
Appreciate that the city went back and got questions answered, and I feel comfortable with the application.
Any other comments? Some of the high points, Mr. Manager? Or one, I think the price
Changes
decreased?
within this, I believe we have one consultant due to workload is no longer part of the application. And then we also have a reduction in the cost of $2,000 for what was originally allocated, and I believe some clarification that was on a couple of the pages. Other than that, that was it. Nothing significant.
Very good. Is there any other debate on this? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
With an actual proposal.
Opposed, abstained, none. Order passes by a vote of 7-0. Moving on to new business. We have order 07-011-920221, approving the liquor license for El Tequila restaurant located at 245 Central Street. This is a public hearing. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Councilor McLeod, Councilor Boss on a second. No one's in the public is here to speak on this issue tonight, and I just want to double check anybody online.
We have no public online.
No public online. Bring it back to the council. Council, any discussion, any debate? Councilor Zani?
Where's this located on Center Street?
245 is
245.
located right next to, between Sam's Italian Shop and then also the,
And a guard.
Broke Mall, the old Panda. Yeah. Councilor McLeod?
Just one question. Did the previous occupant have a liquor license in that location?
yes, they did.
Yes.
Okay, that was it.
Okay, very good. I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Okay. Passes by a vote of 7-0. Looks like we might be done this meeting in time to get there. Does this take effect immediately?
We have to issue them the license, so
I'll bring
probably
it.
tomorrow.
I'll bring it. I'll bring it tonight, okay? Just save you some money. Okay. Last open session, second open session of the night. Is there anybody, any members of the public that would like to speak?
There's one more.
One other.
08.
The money allocated for the,
Airport?
Hold on, it's on a different sheet.
Is it not on your agenda?
No, let me revert to the master on that one. Bear with me, I'm sorry. Okay. Next on the agenda is 08-011-92021, authorizing the reallocation of $150,000 originally located at the Auburn Airport main terminal parking lot to be used for the East Side Aircraft Apron Reconstruction Project. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Councilor Carrier. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor McLeod. Anybody in the public like to speak on this? None being? Okay. Bring it back to the council. Council?
Anybody have any questions?
Anybody? Councilor Carrier, you might want to explain this for a second.
The use of the money that we were unable to get moving on the parking lot, and it didn't look like it was going to happen within the next year or so. But the East Side Ramp program came up, and the FAA was offering a grant. The one stipulation is that we had to pay for the study up front, then be reimbursed for the study. The cost of the study for us, I believe, was going to be $137,000. Then when we would get reimbursed, the study would end up costing us $15,000, but it was money that we would be reimbursed for the project. And it's basically trading the cost of the study, which will be about $15,000 for $790,000. And this is the first part of redoing the east side ramps in and around our T hangars and the life flight. And as I said last time, the reason that this needs to be done is those haven't been done in years. And when you start up a jet helicopter, you don't want a piece of asphalt or concrete getting sucked into the engine. So that area has to be redone. And just so that you know, the FAA has a very strict interpretation of what gets redone, and there will be another part to this, but to get this money up front, we needed to have that money available so that we can get that study done.
Is there any other questions on this before I bring it to a vote? Pretty straightforward. Thank you for being riding shotgun on this, Councilor. I'm sorry, Councilor Gary, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's a pop-up because I thought good Councilor Walker was going to follow up. Okay, so they need the money, they're going to get paid back. Are they going to take the money that they get paid back to put it where this money is being taken from now? Or are they going to come back to us in the CIP and try to get the money again from us?
Money will go back into the general fund, and it will be used for the second part, but the repairs, if you look at the study, the repairs are well over $1.3 million. So eventually they will come back for the rest of the money. But again, we're trading the very low cost of the study for $800,000 in funding. So that gets us a lot further down the road. And rather than have to fund the entire thing, we're only having to fund a very small part of it.
And my follow-up question is, if this is the Lewiston Auburn Airport, and it's the Lewiston Auburn Board that's on the airport, does Lewiston have to vote to do this as well?
Yes,
They're voting tonight, or at their meeting.
they're doing the same thing tonight as that we are.
Yeah, the costs are split evenly.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to find out.
If I could, Mayor. Jill, do you have any other clarification regarding because it is bond related?
Actually, we bonded this about 2 years ago, and I have a time frame on the bond money that it should be spent within 18 months. So by using this now, we'll get out of that issue, and then we will get reimbursed, so it will go back and be there for the parking lot project when we figure out what exactly we're going to do there because of the cost. So it will go back into that project.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to ask for a vote. All those in favor of the order, please raise your hand. Passes by a vote of 7-0. Next is the second open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business or an item that does not appear on this agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the community room? No. Is there anybody online in Zoom? Please use the raise hand icon. Not seeing anyone. Okay, very good. I'll now close the second open session. We'll move on to reports. Mayor's report. Pretty busy around town. Things are starting to kick back up at post-holidays. I do want to make one announcement, though, make sure everybody's aware that the Comp Plan Review Committee is meeting very actively. Primary meetings are as a main group, as a subgroups. The next meeting, the monthly meeting of the entire group, is January 21st this week. Go to our website. Right on the homepage is a Comp Plan Review portal. Click on it. You can gather all the information, notes, stuff that we're talking about, calendar events, and how to log in. You all can log in and listen. These are fully open meetings. I think it's important as we move very efficiently through this process that the public is there, it's engaged, and they understand what we're talking about, and providing feedback when appropriate. That's it. We'll move on to council. Start off to the right this time. Councilor Carrier.
The school committee finance committee met the other day and went over a couple of things. We had some updates from the adult education and nutrition program. As you may well understand, adult education right now is in a diminished capacity, but we are ready to move as soon as it's open, and that they are looking for ways to bring that program possibly to computers so that we may be able to utilize that. Our nutrition program is doing a tremendous job insofar as being able to feed the students and getting the food out. We had some updates on the CARES funds usages. Most all of our CARES funds have now been encumbered so that we're up to date with that. There is discussion about future CARES money coming in, but at least with that, there will be a disbursement date of 2023, so there won't be such a necessity to try to get the money spent within a short time period. We had some project updates. AMS is 99% complete. They have some things that they're still finishing up insofar as security. That will be done fairly quickly. They've realized now that they're going to need some tinting on the windows because it faces the east, so when the sun comes up in the morning, it's very bright in that office. They're also changing the old office over into new classrooms, so that's almost done. The Franklin program, the bid comes back on the February 2nd. We're sort of excited because we have 10 contractors that are bidding that. It's always nice to have that many contractors that are interested in the project. We're hoping that we'll get some good prices with that. And I'll sort of touch with the EL. The bids are due on the 9th, February 9th for EL. There are still 4 companies that are in the running for that. I believe the committee is going to meet in February, and they will discuss, at that point, they may be discussing the wish list and the priority. And the last 2 things that we have are the classrooms in East Auburn and Washburn. Those are both in. We have gotten the warranty issues settled with the companies in regards to the heating system, and they are almost in, and we sold 5 buses, 5 of the reserve buses. That's everything I have right now.
You sure?
Yeah, I hope so.
No, thank you for the updated support, and I appreciate that. I think we all do. Councilor Walker.
Yes, this thing always takes a little while for it to pick up my voice. I don't think it likes me, tell you the truth.
I'm sure it doesn't.
The Age Friendly is still offering a spaghetti dinner, February 14th, Valentine's Day. All you have to do is call Recreation Department and order what you would like. They'll give you all the information for picking it up, and it's free. But remember, we can only give away so much, so don't wait too long. Get your order in, because we're going to fill up the space that we have, and you'll have to pick it up, of course. We can't eat inside, and it'll be great spaghetti and meatball and all the little fixings that go with it. So call up the Recreation Department and order your dinner, and be happy, I guess, with the rest of us.
Is there an age minimum? Because Councilor McLeod and I were free that night.
You can be any age you want to be, as long as you want to eat spaghetti.
Is there a vegan option for the meatballs?
You can leave a donation to us if you'd like there. We can always use the help from the public, and if any businesses would like to help us, we try to put a lunch and a dinner, whatever it may be, on every couple months, and funds are tight, as everybody else is the same, I know, but if you want to give away a little something, we're welcome to take your money. There's one thing I'd like to bring up to the manager, I don't want him to forget, is there's a bid coming up here in a week or 2 for Soper Mills Road, for the underground piping that they're going to put in there. There's quite a lot of people that feel that they're going to drain that pond, and if they drain the pond, it'll turn into a brook, and if it turns into a brook, we will probably lose all of whatever we have there for small animals, and we don't want to see that happen. So looking at the little bit that I've seen at this point, that underground piping is much too large for that area. It's going to drain that pond to a brook, and we don't want to see that happening in the community. So before that goes out to bid, I would like to be able to sit down with you and whoever and talk about this, because once it goes to bid, I'm worried they're going to give the contract out. And that's a big pipe going in there. I just feel that it's oversized.
I'm working on getting that review, and we'll sit down and look at it.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything you're all doing at the Senior Center. It's truly great. With regards to funds, we'll talk later during budget season, I think, about how we appropriate our community development block grants, especially the neighborhood grants, and to see if there's any funds available from that, from the federal side. Councilor Milks?
Today, we had the sewer department trustee meeting. We've started the discussions on the overflow tank, sewer overflow tank for the sewage department, for the sewage treatment plant. That's a big subject that is coming up. It'll be a few years out, but it's a very, very large subject, so people need to start paying attention to that. Also, tomorrow we've got the water district trustee meeting, and we're continuing to broach the subject of cost apportionment between Lewiston and Auburn. So that is tomorrow. We're on Zoom for both.
Fairness and integrity. Counselor? Councilor McLeod.
Yes, LATC met recently. We're still starting the budget conversations of what our next fiscal year is looking like. It doesn't follow the calendar year, so. And just to echo that the comp plan's coming together, and we're meeting very frequently and looking to impose lots of big ideas and big changes, hopefully.
Councilor Zania.
Thank you. I have a question about the committee on committees meeting. I've been asked by a couple of people on a committee of when they will know if their committee will continue.
Yeah, you covered that earlier today, actually. That would be in March, correct?
So we will, through one of these workshops that we have, we'll have the language to present back before you with any changes. So it is coming up. I'm going to talk a little bit about it in my report.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing is, yes, the EL Building Committee is meeting in February. They will be talking about the wish list. What are things that we can afford as we're moving forward, especially as the bids come in? And is the council interested in getting an update from the building committee? And if they are, then I will bring it up at that, the next building committee meeting.
Yeah, I think it's actually imperative, especially for a couple reasons. When we voted to approve this project, and please pass this along to the building committee, we voted to approve a project after a very rigorous discussion with the architects and general contractors, assuring us that they not only had a contingency, but a secondary contingency, and then a tertiary contingency to cover any and all additional cost overruns. What I'm hearing right now is you're going to have to make some hard value engineering decisions in order to cut the cost because we have done a triple run over. This needs to be explained because when you start cutting the program based upon what the council and the previous council approved, it is not the project that we approved. So I have some serious reservations about entrusting a committee to reappropriate capital for a project that we have not approved. So from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint, we might need to have a deeper conversation, but let's definitely start with having them give us a presentation.
I think that's important. I'll make sure that I communicate that. I'm sure Councilor McLeod will as well. The other part is the fundraising aspect that was promised has not nearly come to pass, and that was part of what was supposed to pay for some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I think we always went into the fundraising aspect was a thought or the chance that it wouldn't come to fruition or at least meet goals. It was a long-term, multi-year effort. I'm a little bit more concerned that this council's order this order that they passed authorizing a high school had specific characteristics of that high school. And the deviation is really concerning me because it could change the nature of what we approved. So let's, if we can dig into that, Mr. Manager, we could have some more conversations with the superintendent and school committee on that as well. But thank you for bringing that up. I didn't realize it was that past. Okay, Councilor Boss?
All of my committee meetings are happening later this week and next week, so I'll have more to update at our next meeting. But I did want to bring forth that I had a number of residents reach out to me about their excitement about Holy Donut and also their concern about the road and the traffic that's been happening there. There have been a lot of backups and concern about the safety of the roadway there. Is the city staff worked with Holy Donut for a longer-term plan?
So we are monitoring that. It actually meets the queuing requirement that when it was permitted. We believe some of this is just because of the newness, much like what took place with Chipotle on Center Street, which also happens on occasion for Dunkin' Donuts currently on Center Street. We work with them. We work currently with like Dunkin' Donuts to ensure that they try to keep that flow of traffic moving on the street. So staff is aware of it and they'll continue monitoring.
Great, thank you. And I know Holy Donut's been doing a great job. I was able to go this past weekend, and they have sheets that they're handing to people as they're waiting in line, so you can make your decision faster. So I know they're doing their due diligence, and it's nice to see that enthusiasm.
But did you get your Holy Donut keychain that gives you eternally 10% off of all future orders by being the first person in line? No? Or on the first day? You didn't get this?
No.
Oh.
Payola.
I'm your new best friend.
Special
I know the city
treatment.
manager got the keychain because he was 2 cars in front of me saying, ha ha.
I think what we heard was the mayor was bringing donuts to the next meeting.
Thank you,
That's what
thank
we
you.
heard. So, I'm good. So I have a few things just to share with you. One, regarding the next few meetings. So again, we talked about the special meeting that will be in January 25th, the February 1st. And on February 1st, we will again present to the council to move that meeting to the 16th. If that's approved, that'll be, because that Monday is a holiday, So that means that those 3 meetings are really what we're aligning for continuation of the ordinance review. I encourage you to take a look at the ordinance that we have not and the ones that we presented today. Let me know, please reach out if you've got any that stand out that we should be looking at, just to ensure that it's on the list. I know it's a lot of reading, but I encourage you to take a look at that. We will be bringing back the committee on a committee's recommendations in a strike-through format, so you'll have that as well to take a look at. And I believe that might actually be at the next meeting. I'll have to look at what our schedule looks like, but I believe that's at our next meeting. Not the special meeting, but the February 1st meeting. Also, on February 16th, if that'll be the date that we set, I just want to let you be aware that 2 items that'll be on that I know you all pay very close attention to and have requested more information on. One is regarding the reconstruction of roads. I have Dan Goyette coming in, Public Works Director, to talk about what's on the future for road reconstruction, so you'll know what we're looking at. Again, I'm trying to align a lot of these prior to budget, so you'll have a good opportunity to discuss this with him. And then before some of these are presented, you'll have a chance to weigh in on them, so your voice is being heard prior to. Also, spring cleanup will be one of those workshop items. I've asked Dan to bring forward 3 or 4 recommendations of what spring cleanup could look like moving forward. One of those would be the exact same program that we're currently operating, but then also some other solutions, or maybe even a hybrid solution to what we're running right now. So that'll be on the 16th. So if you've got any thoughts on that, you want to provide that to me, please do so before that meeting. I also have in these next few meetings the final reporting on the CARES funds, the election funds. We just received some of our final reporting from the state, so we'll have that prepared for you, and that'll be also in a workshop. We'll present that. We also need now to work in the workshop that was just mentioned regarding the schools. I have a meeting with the superintendent tomorrow. I'll speak with her about that as well, so she's prepared prior to the meeting to maybe be able to identify what dates might look good. So we'll go ahead and have that communication. COVID vaccinations, we are having conversations with the state and also local representatives. I know there's some, Councilor Lozandra told me about some meetings that are happening. I have requested that Auburn be part of that. They are looking at potential Auburn locations for the vaccinations, massive community outreach type locations for that, and we are looking at possible sites, and we'll communicate with them. So that's all I have at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager, 2 things. Is it possible for you to send an updated meeting list to us, because we're getting a few changes so that we can anticipate that, and sometimes it offsets our regular every other week meeting, and I'd like to be able to plan forward. And the other thing is, in terms of the high volume vaccination site, should you be the contact person at the city for any?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Moving on, we're going to go to Ms. Eastman, Finance Director, for her December 2020, final monthly report.
Okay, I gave you the report for December. Looks pretty good. As you can see, we're halfway through the fiscal year, and the revenues at this time are at 57%, which is 5.95% higher than we were at this time last year. The main reason for that is we received our Betty reimbursement from the state 2 months earlier than normal, and that's almost $300,000. I mean, $3 million. So that makes up most of that. Excise tax and revenue sharing continue to outpace the budget, which is a good thing. And our expenditures are a little high, but the main reasons were the reasons I've talked about the last few months of the transfers and so forth. It's nothing that makes me concerned. I know that this is all going to come into line by the time we get to the end of the year. So if you have questions for me, I would be glad to answer.
Any questions? So, I mean, we're trending pretty well. State reimbursements are still on par. We have no red flags out there that we need to be aware of, huh? as of right now, knock on wood,
No, I mean, I do watch it very closely
of course.
and have conversations with departments if I see anything that concerns me, so,
Very good.
everybody seems to be, paying attention to their budgets and keeping them in line, so.
There's no further questions. I'd like to entertain a motion at this time to accept and place on file the December 2020 financial report.
So moved.
Second?
Motion for Counselor Carrier, second by Counselor Milks. All those in favor? Okay, we accept the report by a vote of 7-0. Next, just want to make sure, next is actually executive session regarding a personnel matter pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405-6A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Counselor Milks, second from Counselor Carrier. All those in favor? Opposed? None being? We're now in executive session. I will tell everybody before we go off the air, we have no actions to take after this executive session, so we will not be coming live again. Have a great night. We'll see you soon.